So I was thinking about default behaviors that can make a difference in your dog's life. So I thought about Patricia McConnell telling the story about how she had one of her dogs and she was at a sheep competition because she has working sheepdogs. And her dog, I don't remember quite all the details, but the basic gist of it was one of her dogs was away from her with some sheep, and another dog saw it, her dog, and was headed towards it and not in a friendly way because for whatever reason, this other dog thought it was their sheep or whatever, but it was obvious that this other bigger dog was headed towards Patricia McConnell's dog and not in a friendly manner. Now, her dog is away from her in the field, and she didn't quite know what to do when somebody sidled up to her and said, "Down your dog." And she said, "What?" And they said, "Down your dog." So she gave the dog the signal. The dog went down, diffused the entire situation because the dog who was coming and was being aggressive towards Patricia's dog saw that this dog was not any threat to its sheep or whatever, was now just lying calmly in the grass, and it really diffused the situation. And I thought, what a beautiful behavior to have, a default behavior that your dog understands that you can use to diffuse a situation.
And you can use it at a distance.
Yes.
What we should record the podcast on today.
Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
So you're talking about building a distance down. How would you teach a client to do that if that was something that they, for example, if they wanted a distance down, a down that the dog could do, say, 25 or 50 feet away from them?
Okay. Well, I did this. It was important to me to teach it to Bingley because I thought this was really cool. I wanted to try it and I wanted to figure out how to do it. So the way I did it was Bingley had a hand command as well as a voice command for down. And his hand command for down was for me just to take my index finger and point at the ground and he would drop into his down. But I realized that at a distance, he was not going to be able to see that because it's going to be down by my side. And I needed sort of an upward movement that would mean the same thing. So what I did was on my front porch, I had a gate. So I put him on one side of the gate and I was on the other. And I started out just standing on the steps, not very far from him, and giving him the down command. But what I did first was I threw my hand in the air and then I pointed down. So I was adding a new command. So I threw my hand in the air, then I pointed down, said down, and down he went. Okay. So then what I did, and I tossed him a treat. So then what I did was I'm at the top of the steps. So then I started backing down the steps, doing the same thing, but stop saying the word because I wanted him to be able to do it without hearing the word. So I'd throw my hand in the air, throw it down. As soon as he downed, I tossed him a treat. And one of the things that I found was I had to get really good at tossing the treat because I didn't want to release him from the down. So one of the other things I started doing then was downing him and then then holding out my hand in the stay, then walking over and giving him a treat because I didn't want him to break it in case I wasn't very good at tossing. So what I found was I just varied the distance that I was from the porch, and he was always behind the gate, so he couldn't actually come to me. And then I would do it. Sometimes I was from the left, sometimes I was from the right, sometimes I was right down from the porch. Sometimes I was 5 feet, sometimes I was 15 feet. I varied the distance and I varied the angle so that no matter where I was, when I threw my hand in the air, he realized that if he dropped to a down first and then my hand coming back down again, reinforced it. And what I found was after we did this for several weeks, now this is many years ago, so I can't remember exactly how long I did this. Then I did it by keeping the gate open on the porch. So when I stopped having the barrier, I reduced the distance because I've now removed one of the factors. I've changed things up a little bit. I started once again at about 5 feet. or had him at one end of the porch and I was at the other end of the porch. And then once again, when he realized it didn't matter that the gate was open, he still had to go down. Then I could increase distance and angles and that kind of thing. And then after we were good at that, then I moved him into the front yard and off of the porch. And then I moved him to the backyard. And then I tried it in the field. Now, sometimes when I would take him out in the field, I would put him on a long line so that just to have a little bit of a safety net. But it didn't take him very long to understand that when I threw my arm into the air, and especially when I brought it back down, he would just go boom right into a distance down. And it was really handy. It was far handier than I thought it was ever going to be. I wanted to do it because I thought it was kind of cool. And I just wanted to see if I could teach it because I wasn't sure that I could do that. But I found it to be really handy, like in the same kind of thing. If we were out in the field and I saw a new dog coming and he was at a distance and I wasn't sure about this dog, I would down him so that I could watch the new dog coming into the field and make sure that it was okay for Bingley to go and visit him. But that's how I did it. And it was one of those things where because I really wanted to do it and I wanted to do it right, I was willing to take my time and build it so that by the time I took it out into the field, it was really strong.
So you could even build it with like a settle mat or a place cue for a go to your spot or go to your bed. It's the same kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what I really wanted him to understand was he didn't have to have a mat to go down.
Right. It could be.
I wasn't teaching him go to mat. I was teaching him down. So that's why, and it was important to me that he really be able to do it in distracting environments, which is why I started on the porch, because I knew that I could keep him contained by the gate.
So can you think of any other default behaviors that you think you could utilize to help a dog with, say, barking at the front door, jumping on guests, or resource guarding?
Yeah, I think, of course, going to go to mat is a perfect one for jumping on people or for the door or for, when my grandchildren are over and spilling crackers all over the place. Any kind of a go to mat is just a really good default behavior. And one that I like too, or, kind of like one of the things that I also like to do is just when a dog has a kennel or a mat, that's sort of their sacred space. So that my dogs always know, like when Zuzu comes into my office, if she's in my office, leave her alone. Because she's saying, I'm exiting the situation because it's too much for me. And so I think having a safe space that a dog feels is their safe space and protecting that for them is really important, because then I think dogs will then remove themselves when the situation becomes overwhelming. So I think that's kind of related, but it's not necessarily a behavior, but it's a circumstance that I want dogs to have. So go to mat, which is very similar to a down, is just one of the things that I have found having big dogs like Bernese Mountain Dogs, for me, that was so important that Buckley sit, because even just standing, they're imposing dogs, right? And sit seems to be a pretty neutral position for most dogs. So what I remember thinking about that when I came home one time and Buckley was in the driveway and he came bounding down the driveway to me. And I thought, this is my dog. And I know that he's friendly, but goodness gracious, he's a big dog. And that's kind of overwhelming when he comes bounding at you. So one of the things that we just really worked on with Buck was like when we were in downtown Granville, just sit. Sit was a really big one for him because he was not the type to go running off per se, but I really wanted him to have a behavior where he felt safe, but others felt safe around him as well. So I think that for big dogs, I have found sit to be a really good default behavior.
Yeah. And I would say like a lot of times down is somewhat similar. I tend to like down, and not cueing it. So letting the dog offer that default behavior as kind of okay, I'm relaxed enough that I can interact and add more to my plate.
Right. And then you just reinforce that. when dogs offer behaviors, like right now, Zuzu is lying right next to me. If I had treats on my desk, which I normally do, I would be kind of dropping them to her.
Right. And just reinforcing what a good girl she is for chilling out while you're recording the podcast.
Yeah.
I do think back to Karen Deeds and her marker cues and like teaching a location, like being able to cue the dog to go to my bedroom nightstand, to get them away from a situation in the house. So naming different locations, different things. So you already talked about like the go to your spot or whatever with a place cue. I often think in my dog's world, bedtime, which means go to your crate. But also teaching something like, cookies, that means go to my bedroom or go to my office, naming those different locations so that I could even potentially cue different dogs to go to different areas if there was some sort of something brewing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think sometimes too, I think this happens just in management because I realize I have never really named my office. But I will say to Zuzu, we're going to the office, and she'll trot up the stairs and turn into the office as opposed to going into our bedroom or going into the spare bedroom. So I think just by default and by always saying, going to, let's go to my office and going to the same room, dogs begin to understand this kind of thing. And so I think it's important to pay attention to what you've inadvertently taught your dogs, because I think then you can actually use it and you can then reward it. Okay, you understand what office means. Great. How can I use that in the future? And how can I reward that as a constructive behavior? I will tell you though, Clementine, who's this is sort of a not that it went awry, but it's just the way Clementine is. I was telling Tina before we started the podcast about which had brought up this whole idea of default behaviors. Is just a couple weeks ago, we had all the grandkids, or a bunch of my grandkids and their family over for dinner. And we had 2 tables in the dining room. And the tables were completely clear of food, dishes, everything else. And we were in the kitchen. And Brad and my daughter Ellie and I were in the kitchen. And we looked out. And there was Clementine standing on the card table, on one of the tables. And Brad says, "Clementine, what do you think you're doing?" And he walks in and Clementine's looking around like, well, okay. She didn't know how to get down off the table she'd gotten onto. So she was kind of looking ways to get off. And when she couldn't, she just went, okay, fine. And she sat I'll just sit here because that's my default behavior. So we're tail wagging. So I realized her default behavior is sit even when she's being bad. So
there's folklore in my little agility world that someone had a dog that was having a really hard time learning table. And one Thanksgiving, she's clearing off the dining room table and somebody says the word table and the dog jumped on the table and laid down, and guests were losing their marbles. And the woman was telling the dog what a good dog he was.
Yes.
It's like, yay, you did it down on the table. Now get off, please.
Yes.
So you do have to be a little bit careful about what you ask.
Yes.
For.
Yes. Do be careful.
But I love this idea of just really simply showing people you can have behaviors that have all sorts of zany names. Like you could do cuckoo, and that means, go to my office, or, I don't know, do your chores means potty, right? You can do all sorts of cool stuff. And you can even incorporate the kids. And I think this is like a really big piece, whether we're incorporating grandparents into it or whether we're incorporating kids, a lot of this stuff is the same. And so giving both the kids and the dogs agency to be able to move one another without physical contact is a win.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, which also goes in some ways to that really reliable recall that we've talked about. I think that's one of those default behaviors, but sometimes you may not want to call the dog because the dog coming to you would put it into danger, which is important. Why it's important to have like a distance down or a distance sit so that you can stabilize, isolate your dog, and then when it's appropriate, call the dog to you. But you don't always there are times when I could see like, okay, I need you to stay right there.
Right. There's
Because,
a snake between me and my dog, and a venomous snake. Like, I live in Georgia. Everything's venomous.
yeah, which is
And
why I live
the deer probably. So yeah. So sometimes I don't want my dog to close the distance. I want my dog to stay out where they are.
Right. It's really important that you had two completely different kinds of things. And so that Bingley's recall was very different. His recall word was different. The gesture for it was different. So that when I threw my arm in the air, that meant you stop and you down yourself right there. And I think it was, I would, for him to come to me, I'd pat my left shoulder. I remember crossing my and patting, I think that's what I did. So it's important that I think that you have, if you can and you want to, is to have both. But a really reliable recall is another, I think, definite behavior that you want to cultivate in your dog, but make sure that they understand that when it's a recall and when it's a stay.
Definitely. And there are some old, crusty old dog trainer tricks. For example, using your dog's name indicates movement, but just giving the cue indicates non-movement. It's stationary. And even which foot you're putting weight on, like oddly, right? If I'm putting weight on my leg closest to the dog, I'm asking the dog to move with me. And if I'm moving the other leg, I'm asking the dog to resist moving with me. I'm giving them a little bit more support. And it's funny because I think a lot of times families don't realize just how much their dog watches them and reads the tea leaves.
Yeah.
And they most assuredly do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think about, Rosemary, my grand dog, the Aussie, smart dog. And she just gets it. And it doesn't take her long to learn stuff. And she's just, is as trying and busy as Rosemary can be. On the other hand, Rosemary is, she's absolutely wonderful with my grandkids and allows them to do all kinds of things like Gregory will lay down on top of her and she's fine. But Rosemary also has cues where she will, she'll look at Emma and Emma will say, okay, I do need to move Gregory because this is becoming too much for Rosemary. So I think that our dogs also teach us, I guess it would be sort of the same kind of thing, the same kind of cues. They can cue us in the same way to say, I need help here. And I think we need to pay attention to that too. So I think this goes both ways. I think we need to teach our dogs reliable commands where we ask them to do something that are sort of their default behavior. But I think we also have to understand that they will default to us and say, I've done this. Now I need your support. You need a default behavior to get me out of this situation. And
yes, I would say that we sometimes miss that plaintive look from them.
Yes.
Right? I get a lot of parents who will send me a video of something where they have an unrelated question. And while I'm watching the video, the dog is pleading with the adult human to help them. And the adult human is missing it, right? And not because they're not awesome people, because I have the best customers in the whole world. It is more, no one ever taught them that meant something.
Yes.
So, I think anytime we get to know our dog a little bit better is a win because we understand that more subtle signaling a little bit better than we did before.
Yes. And I think it can also work too. I just remember when Bingley had soft tissue histiocytic sarcoma, and he started limping a little bit. And I just remember we were playing in the field, and a friend of mine brought her shepherd that Bingley loved to play with, and they were playing fetch, and Bingley self-downed. And I was like, this is interesting. He's way out, and he looks at me, and I hadn't even done anything, and he downed. And I went, there's something up with my dog. And I called him to me, and he was limping a little bit. And anyway, There's a long story that goes then with the diagnosis of the histiocytic sarcoma. But it was one of those things where I thought he was using his default behavior of a distance down to signal to me there's something wrong.
So I mean, I just had the case this morning with a new puppy class person, with a delightful little lab puppy who's sensitive, right? And so I got to have this amazing, beautiful journey happen today where the puppy went from really, really shut down to on her own choosing to walk into the training area and to go exploring and to meet another puppy and to play with that puppy. And all of it went really slow. The puppy set the pace. And the woman really got to see how giving a puppy space, agency, and incentive, but not pressure, is really kind of a magical combination. So I think all the time, like our adult dogs kind of need that too. Sometimes they need space. Sometimes they need more agency, and sometimes they need encouragement, but not pressure. So I will tell you a new default that I'm using is Jack very much is enjoying chewing, beef cheeks at the moment. That's his favorite at the moment. And he likes to take them in my bedroom to chew on them either on the rug or on the bed. And he's a good citizen about it. And so more and more, when I go to grab a beef cheek for him, he's like, hey, can we go down the hallway? So I've started using that even when strangers are coming in the house, and Jack's more relaxed. He's a little bit further away. He's in the bedroom instead of his crate. So it just gives our household a little bit of flexibility. Now, we don't have little kids in the house, so I don't have to worry about somebody, opening my bedroom door and touching the beef cheek. Chris is well aware of, that our dogs are special little creatures. But it's been interesting to even have a 9-year-old dog say to me like, hey, is this an option we can put on the flow chart? And I'm like, sure. Yeah. If you want to go to the bedroom, and he will go to the guest room too. So he's arguably taken over all the bedrooms as places he likes to chill out and relax.
Well, one of the things that I think is also important to remember is that when we're talking about these default behaviors, we're teaching them in general to our new dogs, to the dogs to our puppies or to our young dogs that we get. But the value of them really comes home to me when our dogs get older. Because when our dogs get older, things become a little bit harder for them. People will say to me, gosh, my dog was never afraid of thunderstorms, and now he's 11 and it really bothers him. I'm like, yeah, thunderstorm phobia happens more often in older dogs than it does in younger dogs. And our older dogs need our support because they may not be hearing as well or seeing as well, or noises may bother them. And so what I found was those default behaviors were a great way for my dog to signal to me, hey, this is really hard for me. Buckley would sit a lot more, and we're going for a walk and he would go a certain distance and then he'd sit and say, look, I can't do this anymore. Can we go home? Or Bingley, like I said, when he was developing the histiocytic sarcoma and he was limping, he would down himself. So I think that what you'll find with these default behaviors is that that teaching our dogs these default behaviors that they can use, that we can use to keep them safe, they learn to keep themselves safe with it. And as we begin to really understand what they're saying to us, then especially as an older dog, they can use those behaviors to communicate to us that I need your help. I need your support. And I think also too, if like with the going to bed thing or the settle mat or the safe space, older dogs will probably use that more often. If a younger dog comes over to visit or the grandkids come over and it's too much for the dog and they go to this place that you have said is their safe place, and you find your dog doing that even more, it's a clue that maybe your dog has had enough excitement for the day. But I think you'll find that these default behaviors, the going to mat, having a place to go like Mr. does to a bedroom or a crate or, these things are going to provide your dog with the means to keep themselves safe and comfortable when they're older. And so taking them to a younger dog will give them tools that will help them in their retirement, so to speak.
Well, yeah. And again, like Jack's 9 and he's teaching me new stuff that makes him happy. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yes. Yes. No, I agree. Zuzu's 9 too. She turned 9 this year. And, it's so funny because Clementine is the more, although she doesn't sound like it, she is actually the more reflective dog. She will stop and she will watch. And that's the other thing for Clementine, if we're out for a walk and she sees a new dog or sees something that she's not used to, she stops and she just watches it and watches it and watches it until she decides what she wants to do. And one of the things that we have learned is that she generally likes new things and new people, but we have to let her approach it on her terms. And so when she stops and she's considering a new dog or whatever, neither one of us ever press her forward, ever say, oh, come on, you got to go meet the dog or we got to move along. We both stop and say, okay, let's just watch and see what the situation offers. And I think that what it does is it proves to Clementine that she can trust us to keep her safe, that we're not going to ask her to do something she can't or doesn't want to do. And 2, it also keeps a situation on a much more even keel when the dog feels like it has some agency. And maybe part of these default behaviors is a way of encouraging agency in our dogs as well.
I would agree, right? It allows us, the more that we teach cues to help them navigate, the more freedom that they can actually have.
Yeah. So what other behaviors? So we talked about distance down, settle mat, cueing to go to a particular area, whether it's a settle mat or a room. We've talked about sit. What else would you cue a dog to do and make as a default behavior for a dog?
Probably quiet.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you can use default behaviors for all sorts of things. You can use it for jumping up. You can use it for greeting people, greeting dogs, watching the kids ride their bikes. I like default behaviors for all of that. For my dogs, typically it's either a sit or a down and making eye contact with me.
Yes.
So that I can help guide them and support them in whatever's going on and giving them feedback about,
right.
They're like, oh, that's a lot, or that's safe. Oh, that was funny.
Like in your perfect puppy plan, one of the first things you teach is focus on me. And
yeah, and it's not lured. It's catching them getting it and offering it. So
right.
I'll use the example of the little puppy that started the adolescent class today. She's just 16 weeks old. She's a lab in a fear stage, a little bit sensitive, and was pretty shut down outside the classroom door. And so we just took it slow, and I went out there and sat on the floor and used a little bit of pheromone and tossed a bunch of treats. And, it cost me a lot in treats, but we then got her into the room where we were set up for a whole confidence course. She tried almost everything we had out. She eventually became interested in and approached and played with another puppy who was here. And she's not comfortable with new dogs. So, I mean, that was a lot of progress in a short period of time. And that's always, gratifying.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Look, it worked. Not that I'm surprised that it worked. I was a little bit surprised that the family let me do it. Because it feels wrong, right? It makes my heart sad that we still have people literally throwing their puppy into the deep end of the pool and expecting them to figure out how to swim. And behaviorally, that doesn't work so great. And we have better ways to do it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is I also have found, and you probably have too, is that oftentimes people mistake no behavior for good behavior. So you have this shut down dog and they're thinking, oh, look, she's so well behaved. No, she's not. She's shut down. No behavior is not the same as good behavior. In fact, no behavior tells me that something actually serious is going on that we need to address. So,
and it may only be going on between the dog's ears.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And we don't get to decide what's scary. Like I don't get to decide whether or not scorpions are scary for Julie. She's afraid of whatever she's afraid of, and I get to be afraid of whatever I'm afraid of, right? Whether it's a realistic fear or not. So, we
Yeah.
extend that courtesy to other humans. I think sometimes we forget to extend it to our dogs.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Cats, however, we're totally down with it. Like they can be afraid of everything. We totally embrace that, and we never ever make them conquer it.
Right.
Seriously, everybody knows someone who has a cat that you've never seen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just reported to you that a cat lives there.
Oh, I had a pet sitting client. They, in theory, had 6 cats, right? And it's like, they wanted me, understandably, wanted me to report to them about all 6 cats. And so
I didn't even
sometimes,
see a cat. I put food in the bowl. The bowl was empty the next time I came. I put water in the bowl. There was less water in it the next time I came. There was a litter box. When I left, it was clean. When I came back, it had all sorts of presents for me. I'm assuming there are cats.
yeah. Yeah. And so they said, well, she might be in the basement behind the boxes. So I went down the basement and they had a wall of boxes. And I thought, I am not going to move.
I have seen this movie and it does not end well for the pet sitter.
No, it doesn't.
Were you wearing red?
Yes, it was just. So anyway, but yes, and and each cat had its own bowl, and they got filled, and there was like multiple cat boxes, and so yeah, no, it's my even my own daughter has 4 cats. I only see 2. And, well, 3 of them look exactly alike. So maybe
really is just one cat.
Yeah. So but anyway, so yes.
That's funny.
Anyway, so I think that, the bottom line here is think about the things in life that are important to you, that you want your dog to be comfortable and safe with. And how would you help your dog to do that? And what behaviors can you teach your dog that's going to make your life and their life more comfortable, more interactive between the two of you, and give you the results that you want to to have more fun, to be safe, and to make things work much more copacetically in your house.
Well, and honestly, it just costs you some pieces of cheese or hot dog to get finally one member of your household to listen to you and do what you ask, which can sometimes be a game changer.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I kind of, I think about it. Maybe I should try, a couple of beers or a shot of whiskey and some cheese with Brad, and he might do more than what I want him to do.
You're like, here's a charcuterie.
Yeah, that's right. Would you please go out and...
Good, Brad. So the other day I was saying to someone, good job in class. And this little boy was like, that's what we say at my house. Good job. So every time I asked him to do something and he would do it and I would say, good job, he would tell me that I did a good job teaching him. And I will say this was a 4-year-old. I'm always a little leery of having a 4-year-old in class, especially with big adolescent puppies, because that's what that whole class is. Like there's a bull mastiff puppy, right?
Okay.
There's
3 times the size of the 4-year-old.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a 100-pound puppy, right? He weighs 4 times what the baby weighs. But what we did was we started with like, hey, let's get your puppy to stop jumping on your head. Which a lot of it was, the baby inadvertently doing things. He's not a baby. He's 4, but the 4-year-old doing things that kind of fired the dog up. The dog has some really great default behaviors. So then it was just teaching those default behaviors to the child so the child could read what was going to happen and anticipate a little bit. And then we transitioned it to the other 2 puppies so that he could do socialization and help train those other 2 puppies. And one of the things that was a big change that helped him was he first was trying to hand the treats to the dogs, but he was a little bit worried about his fingers and dog mouths, as most kids are. Then when he would throw the treats, invariably they would go some crazy direction that the poor dog couldn't reach. And so we finally just practiced bowling for dogs, right? We did kind of a line yourself up and take a step and like roll the treat kind of loosely to the dog or shuffleboard or curling or something. And that worked great. So it was really fun to kind of dust off those 4-year-old kid stuff and really have all of the puppies become pretty responsive to this sweet 4-year-old boy for, half an hour or whatever. He also made a fantastic decision when we were ready to let the 3 puppies roughhouse together. We're going to call him Bob. Bob decided that maybe sitting on Dad's lap was a good idea instead of being in the middle of that shiz.
Oh, good for Bob. What a great decision on Bob's part.
Right. Because I was like, what would happen if Miss Tina sat on the floor when the puppies are playing? And he was like, that would not end well. As it is, when this group of puppies is playing, we're all going soft knees, soft knees.
Yes.
Because they have it's so fun when I get to have classes that they've grown up together, right? The puppies became friends in kindergarten and now they're in, high school and they're super still good friends and, talking about forming a lacrosse team. So it's really fun to have that going on, but it was,
I thought they'd be forming a flyball team.
No.
I
am not, I don't build arousal in puppies. I just think that's a bad plan.
Well, I was just thinking that I don't know any dogs that play lacrosse, but there are dogs that do play fly. Now, flyball is not something I have ever had a strong desire to do. For no other reason than the volume of it alone is I kind of like my hearing, and
do I think the dogs have fun? Yes. Do I think that there can be injuries? Yes. Do I think that it's hard for a dog to turn on arousal for however many seconds and then just shut it down?
Absolutely.
Yes. But I also have never taught it to my dogs, so I might be talking out my bum, right? Like it may be that I'm reading things into it that aren't there. But yeah, it's too loud. Every time I've tried to watch it, it's too loud. I have to leave, even with earplugs.
Yeah, it's crazy loud.
And I'm always surprised that there's not, more of a fracas, right? So
because you've got dogs at these incredibly high arousal levels that I'm surprised that there's not more displacement.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel very safe to me. That's really just my own baggage, to be clear. And
anyway, I had intended it more just as a little joke. Okay.
Yeah. Right. No, I get it. So yeah, default behavior. So I would just say this is going to make me think about what are some default behaviors that I could spend this fall building with my dogs to make the holidays that are coming up a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And to spend some time starting now in September practicing it before the cuckoo of Cocoa Puffs of the middle of October hits. This is, by the way, where I'm going to start mentioning, because apparently it's hitting early this year. There is actually a dog bite season. It starts typically around a week before Halloween and ends about the week after New Year's. And it is my understanding more dog bites occur during that season than the rest of the year combined. So I've had some pretty quiet dog bite seasons the last couple of years, and I'm hoping that this year will be nice and quiet too. But just think about just like the holiday seasons are stressful for us. Many of us struggle with autumn, knowing that, we're going to be slogging through winter again is coming. And I think it's hard for our dogs too, right? All of a sudden people are decorating and the wind's blowing more and it's raining more and the deer are making baby deer and the squirrels are making baby squirrels. And just there's a little bit of edge in the air a little bit. So do think about just giving your dogs lots of decompression. Honestly, food scatters in the yard are some of the best stuff you can do to help habituate your dogs to the wind and to all the activity outside. And just reacquaint them with they don't have to bark at every single stimuli they see outside.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting to me that, Zuzu is 9 and she's always been a little bit, I've always kind of wondered whether her vision is just a little off because she'll bark at stuff and then she'll always, oh, that's what it is. Okay, I don't need to bark now. But when I find like when we go out to our cottage, the first 24 hours, she's always on much more alert. Just simply because even though this is an environment she's been in, this is not where I've been lately. And so I think it's really important to understand that our dogs, when things change, they notice these changes too. And they probably notice changes we don't know. Like there are going to be scents that they're going to get whiffs of that we are like, for example, the other day I was out watering my plants and there's a grate that goes over what was the former entrance to our basement, but they sealed that off. It was like an Oz door. And she's like fussing with the grate. I'm like, there's nothing down there. You don't need. And I went, oh, there is a chipmunk down in this area. And of course, I didn't hear it. I didn't smell it, but she heard it and she smelled it. So she went inside and then I built a rope ladder for the chipmunk and attached it to the grate so the chipmunk could run up the rope ladder and get out of the enclosure. Whether he used it or not, I don't know, but I built it for him because I just couldn't leave him down there. So, anyway.
I'm too tender-hearted. I have to like try to rescue the thing.
Yeah, but it was just a reminder to me that they are perceiving the world in a very different way than I am. And when there are changes to seasons, they're going to experience in a different way than I am. And I have
in a lot of ways bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially wind, man. The windy days, whoo.
They're crazy. Crazy days.
They're nutty. Oh, yeah. My dogs are easily 80% more barky on a windy day. Right? Which then can also result in me being much more like, get your tails in here. You're in trouble. Which does not necessarily help their barkiness about the entire world moving all at once. That's not supposed to be moving. So here in Georgia, anyway, it gets pretty still through the summer. Like we don't have a lot of wind. And so this time of year, it gets windy again and the dogs are not prepared.
And yet it happens every year, but they don't seem to remember that. So anyway.
Default behaviors. So like us, share us with the parenting group, share it with your parents or your grandparents, share it with your neighbors. Let us know.
Book club.
Your book club. Share with us any questions you have or topics or individuals you'd like us to interview because we want to really make this a kitchen table conversation that we all enjoy.
Okay, then.
So Julie, how are they supposed to get a hold of us?
Oh, very good, Tina. Thank you for asking. You can email us at feedback@yourfamilydogpodcast.com or because that one sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. I can't figure out why. We've been working on that. You can also email us at yourfamilydogpodcast@icloud.com. That's yourfamilydogpodcast@icloud.com. So
awesome.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.